doing some Christmas shows with the project. For instance, last night I was driving home after midnight and all that. And then I'm doing interviews for my solo album, and the Nightwish show is starting to go on. So, yeah. It ain't the holiday season yet.
Yeah, it's a very hectic time. What does Christmas bring for you? Do you take a little bit of a break over Christmas? You just mentioned you're doing Christmas shows, but do you get a break over actual Christmas?
Yeah, for sure. It is a few days of total radio silence.
Yeah.
Which I'm gonna be having on a small island at the coast of the Atlantic in Brazil.
Awesome! That sounds like it's gonna be amazing.
Yeah. Well, at the moment I see that my backyard is full of snow. There's a lake. It's full of ice. And all that, so, yeah, I'm willing to go.
Yeah. Well, Marko, I've got to say congratulations on this album. Being a fan of Nightwish for so many years, I was really excited to hear this album was coming out. And when I sat down to listen to it, I absolutely loved it. So congratulations.
Thank you. This is good to hear, because it seems that I've been hearing this from quite a lot of interviewers. And, well, I don't know if we're covering the same questions already here, which you didn't ask. That a lot of people were, I guess, expecting the hairy-faced bugger to do metal. And then it turns out to be a pretty versatile and song-wise very, very much having an identity, I guess.
Yeah.
Different from what was expected, and that is, I'm pleased.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that. What kind of music do you listen to yourself? Like, because a lot of people will notice that it's very different to what they would hear with Nightwish. So what kind of music inspires you, and what kind of music do you listen to?
Oh man, I'm inspired almost any kind of music if I hear that there's a good element or the song itself is good or whatever. I am basically, since my youth, I have been very much of a rock and a metal guy. But at the same time, I've always also listened to a lot of other stuff. Like, ever since I was a kid, I got very well inoculated with jazz, Irish folk songs, some classic, Elvis, Beatles, whatever.
Okay.
My father had a big vinyl collection. He was an enthusiastic music listener and also played guitar and sang. So here comes the versatility.
Yeah, definitely.
After all these years. Only thing that I wanted to do, maybe the album to have a strong hint of was absolutely that rock.
Yeah.
and I think there is that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Marko, I have to ask, what made you decide that you wanted to do a solo album? Was this something that you'd been thinking about for years and years, or did it just kind of come to you because you had that little bit of a breakaway from Nightwish?
I had been thinking of it. I had stuff in my desk drawer, lyrical stuff written in Finnish, in English, some bits and pieces of music. And then when that Nightwish sabbatical came, I took all those bits and pieces, which some were very recent, some of the things that ended up on the album, some piece of lyrics or piece of music might have been old as 15 years even. But suddenly they came up and, hey, this fits.
Yeah. So
yeah, after a way.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that writing process. What kind of things were inspiring you when you were writing this music, and then what happened when you decided to put all those bits and pieces together and actually put it into an album?
Well, I had no plans for any kind of a concept or anything like that much deeper. I had stories and some personal visions written down in whatever way and all that. I had a bunch of those. I still have some leftovers, quite a lot of them as well. And when I got the most ready stuff and most interesting stuff, and that sabbatical year coming, I reached out to a couple of friends of mine that I've known as musicians and friends for quite a few years. Mr. Tuomas Väinölä on guitar and Mr. Billy Oliver on keyboards. Both came in and got really into the music, so much that Tuomas actually ended up recording most of the album and producing and mixing it. And Billy was writing string arrangements and some C parts to Voice of My father, for instance, and all that. So without these guys, and when they came in a couple of years back, without these guys, this album wouldn't look or sound as it is. They were a big help in all kinds of ideas I had, and then they had lots of ideas about things, how to incorporate this machinery rhythm to drum set with the drum set, and what kind of things to use here and there. They helped out a lot, and this album looks like me, but I think it looks like them too.
Yeah. I was going to ask that. What was the biggest change that you noticed, not sitting down with a band and working out music with a band that you'd been with for so long? What was that biggest change that you noticed when you sat down to work on this album with musicians that you hadn't worked with for so long?
Biggest change, I guess, was there was the leap of faith that I had stuff that I believed was worthy. And that's always when you're alone. You're not totally qualified to judge. But I had to be able to jump over that fence, and guys got into it. It was a great thing. And how would I say? I had some kind of line of thought, and I lost it. So ask me the question again. I may catch it.
Yeah. What was the biggest change you noticed not recording with Nightwish, recording with other musicians?
Oh yeah. I got it.
Yep.
I got it. But maybe the biggest change is that when you write for yourself, you don't have to think about the strengths or the weaknesses of your bandmates, which is, of course, when you write for the band, you take that into account and you use. You tend to write, okay, here we got this chord and this melody. If I go that way, it'll sound more convincing when we do it. That is the thing you do when you write for a band.
Yeah.
And this time around, I didn't have to do that, but of course I had to take the responsibility of putting myself on the line if I put my face and name on this. So in that way, it was also more responsible and scary.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed here in Australia when this album was announced was a lot of people who were big fans of Nightwish suddenly got very scared and said, "Is this the end of Nightwish?" How did you plan to react to that kind of comment? But also, how did you go about telling the rest of the guys in Nightwish that you were actually going to go and work on a solo album for a little while?
Well, that wasn't really that much of a discussion. I mean, all of us have done some things here and there now and then. I say that this is going on. And then when I kind of already last tour, I was doing a demo version of Stones. I was doing some vocal tracks in the corner of the dressing room when the other guys were having their day nap and all that. And then the next morning when I wake up and go to the tour bus and start brewing some coffee, Evo comes from the bunk section and he's singing, and then Tuomas comes a little bit after. That song has been ringing in my head for the whole night. That was when I kind of figured, okay, Stones might be a single and a video.
Yep.
As it happened.
Tell us a little bit about Stones. That track, when I played it on my radio show for the first time, I had so many people contacting me and saying, you've got to play it again, you've got to play it again. Tell us a little bit about that track and how that came together.
Sorry, that track, you mean Stones?
Yeah, Stones, yep.
Well, it's kind of I have this, I'm a big acoustic player, I got a nice 12-string at home, and that's how the whole song started. Then I kind of figured that this kind of a slightly Mediterranean guitar line would be nice to complement it with a straight blues melody. And that's how the song started to develop. And then if it's a blues melody, let's see what kind of a lyrical side. So then you got this slightly ironic story about how everything gets fucked up in Stones.
Yeah. We mentioned before about the writing process. Can you tell us a little bit about the recording process for this album? Because like you said, this album has so many different varieties on it. What was it actually like to go into the studio and record the album?
Well, I wasn't there all the time, but I was at the main events, like when we booked the studio for the band recording and went there and started doing guitar and drum and bass bottom tracks. That was about a week, a little bit over a studio. Then there was string quartet session a day at Finvox Studios. Lots of stuff, vocals, some machinery, some weird experiments at my home studio. Then Tuomas Väinölä, he's a part owner, I guess, in a smaller studio in Helsinki where we also did a shitload of stuff. Most of the percussion and synthesizers and lots of vocals. Yeah, so and as is, it's a solo project. We didn't put the deadline on it, which eventually we had to, and then we ran over it and had to release the album separately. So putting it down together at the studio it was pretty easy, but it took way longer than we thought.
Yeah.
Because, it was not that easy at first. There was a lot of hassle going on, and like I said, I had rehearsals with Nightwish and album making, and I was doing shows and blah and everything. So some hard days, but then in the end, when we finally managed to hit the right things, it came pretty painless.
Yeah. Who did you work with as producer, or did you actually self-produce this time round?
No, the guitar player, Mr. Tuomas Väinölä. He became a producer of the album during the process.
So where to now for you, Marko? Are you going to actually go out and tour with this album? Is that something that you're thinking about, or will this album kind of just be a project that people will be able to listen to in their own home?
I have a feeling that we'll come back to this because it was kind of so obvious. The guys like to do the album, they like the music, and we like doing shows, and we had good humor and everything. So in a way, it looks like that solo project was what it started as, and then it started to grow out of band.
Yeah.
But I have to let this, to think about it totally seriously, I have to let it lie a little bit. Next year is more of a Nightwish anyway.
Yeah.
But we are doing some shows with the solo band. On February we're going over to Middle Europe to do some shows here and there around Germany and countries decided. And we also did with the Finnish versions. We did last summer of those festival shows.
Yeah. So you are a very busy man. What does 2020 look like for you? What have you got planned for the next 12 months?
I don't know if I have anything planned. I think Nightwish machinery is already planning for me.
Yeah.
He's going to tell me what to do and where to be.
Okay. Yeah, so tell us a little bit also about whether you think this solo project might turn into other albums down the track as well, or do you think this will just be a one-off?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That it started out as a solo project, and it started to grow a band out of it. That implies that there is continuum, that it isn't over yet. But like I said, my next year is full of Nightwish.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to see what's going to happen. But there were pieces of music that we also went through and didn't use on this album, and some of the stuff is pretty good. So every chance of us returning to this is there.
Yeah. Is there any chance you think that you might make it down to Australia sometime next year at all? Because I know there's a lot of Aussie fans who have been waiting for a Nightwish tour now for a little while.
To be honest, again, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
Because this year was a bit hard. There was a lot of work, and when I finally had all things done, the albums were there, 3 music videos had been shot, the Nightwish photo shoots had been done and all that. Then I kind of decided that nobody needs me physically. I was off. I went to my wife's hometown in Brazil, Curitiba, and then we went to beach place for a few weeks, and I forgot everything for a month and a half.
Yeah.
And now I'm back here, and I'm already doing the Christmas shows, and at the same time I'm updating myself. So, and the process is not complete. I'm quite out of the dates and actual things. I just know that the guys are probably at the moment mixing the album in Helsinki.
Yeah. One of the things that really hit me when I sat down and listened to this album was that so many of the tracks felt like they'd be perfect to be used on a film soundtrack.